Feel free to contact me in any of this social network or scan this QR code to follow me in the YouTube channel. So I know I wanted to have this session on DevOps, but I'm not sure how many of you guys have heard DevOps before, or is it the first time you are hearing it? You can
First time.
Okay. So you guys can even ping it in the messenger so that I have it in another monitor so that I can quickly check how many of you guys are. You can also raise a hand. I think there's something called raise a hand. So I think most of you, it'll be new for you, right? So before explaining what is DevOps, if you look around it, there will be several different kind of definitions that will be floating around in internet. And if you talk to people also, they'll have different definitions of DevOps. So I thought I will start with explaining what is not DevOps, right? Anyway, I will try to connect with what you already know, right? I will also try to explain about SDLC and stuff like that, which is closer to you so that you can follow what is DevOps and what is not. Okay, so what is not DevOps, right? So basically, if you talk to some people, they will say DevOps is a team, right? But DevOps is not a team. So I want to clarify things that are not DevOps, right? So if you look at it, what I'm mentioning is it is not a team. It is not just a set of people working together. It is not a role. So it's not like DevOps. They will say, I want to become a DevOps, right? So it's not that, right? It's not set of tools. So some people will say, when you say DevOps, they'll immediately say, okay, Jenkins, right? I hope you guys are still able to see my screen because I'm getting some kind of network notifications, but I hope. If at all it's interrupting, let me know. And then it is not a set of questions and answers for your next interview. I have people recently contacting me, mainly after starting the channel, asking me what are the different questions and answers I should be preparing for the interview for DevOps. But I personally don't believe that you can really prepare for an interview with questions and answer. It's not an exam with question bank. So it's more about understanding the whole thing. It depends on the individual who is going to take the interview. So you can't have a series of questions that one can ask and how you should answer. It all depends on the interviewer and the way it should be done. So it doesn't matter. So DevOps is not even a set of questions or answers. It's not about zero failed deployments, right? So this is very important. A decade back, more than several years, right? People were in software industry. They were trying to make sure applications should not fail, right? So whenever you go to a website, for example, you're accessing Google or you're accessing your Netflix, you're watching Netflix, right? Nobody wants it to be down, right? You want it to be up and running. You don't want this to be interrupted when you're watching a video. You don't want to get interrupted when you're filing an application form online, right? So people are trying for a long time that no application should fail, right? But very later they realized applications or the hardware or any software that runs that, they are meant to fail, right? So we should start embracing the failure. Things are meant to fail, things are meant to break. It's going to happen one day. So all you have to do is to embrace that and prepare yourself for that, right? So that's very important. So it's not about maintaining an application without breaking it. You should foresee that it will break and you should do things so that it can be avoided. I'll come to that little later if it's little theoretical, but so just want to make sure that this explains what is not a DevOps, right? Okay, I don't know how many of you guys are watching or watched the Dark series in Netflix. Have you guys watched the Dark series in Netflix? You can ping in the chat so that I can see. I just want it to be interactive. So if you guys are there, try to chat. Personally, I'm okay if you're unmuting and talking as well. I'm not sure how the other sessions are driven. Kasturi, if it's okay for me to people to just unmute, talk, and then just go ahead and mute. I don't mind.
Yes,
no,
yes,
yes,
yes, do it. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
please go ahead because in webinar, right? If I'm there in our college, then it would have been much more interactive. You guys will be shouting and you guys will be talking, then it will be much more interesting. But this video call is a little painful, and I'm already with this video call for this lockdown for a long time. So feel free
Yes,
to,
sir.
yeah, feel free to open. I mean, another thing that I would like to mention, once you're out of college, you need not use the word sir, uh, because nobody uses it anymore. Okay, maybe in some government organizations, but not in others. Okay, so there are lots of no Netflix to watch. Okay, there are lots of people who are said yes and no and yes and no. Uh, so if you would have watched, you would have checked this symbol, right? So this is a symbol of infinity, right? So it is, and you would have heard about that term, beginning is the end and end is the beginning. It would have been repeated at least 50, 100 times in the series, right? Uh, so even if you have not watched, so this is a symbol of infinity, right? It means things are in a loop forever, right? So in the past, in software industry, things are always thought to be in linear, meaning following a line as a path. Like you start with an activity and then you go to next activity, next activity, next activity, and then it ends there, right? And that's how they consider this whole software cycle to be. So it's called software development life cycle. That I guess you guys would have heard in your studies or something. So that's how it hasn't always thought, right? But then later people realize it's not like that. It's actually a cycle. It always comes back and then you always do the same thing again and again and again, right? And that's where this symbol of infinity fits into this. And this symbol has been widely used today for representing DevOps. Okay. Now, in the previous slide, I explained what is not DevOps. So now you guys can challenge people if they're trying to explain DevOps in those terms. But then you should know what is DevOps to really challenge them, right? So the definition of DevOps, this is again not from somewhere else. This is something that I mentioned based on the experience. So DevOps is a culture, is a way of working, right? Which combines lots of practices and the way to do software methodologies. And the primary focus is to break the walls between silos. Silos is nothing but small chunks of teams or small chunks of groups of people doing their own work, taking that own responsibility, and they say, this is what I do. And after this, it's your responsibility. So breaking that wall is important, right? And then with the ways to fail fast, right? Just now I explained, we should embrace the failure. Things are meant to fail, right? It can happen in our career as well. So we go try an interview and then we fail. We write some exams, we fail. And it happens. So it's meant to fail. There's always this, right? We can always, it always comes in a cycle. So we should not stress out too much. So it's the same thing with software as well. It is meant to fail, but what we should do is we should fail fast, right? So just because we failed in or flunked in an interview, we should not think that we'll never clear the next one. So we should keep doing it again and again and again, right? And sooner we do, we'll learn lots from those interviews that we failed or exams that we failed, and that way we'll be able to clear it later. Same with the software. So you should be able to deploy your application or deploy your changes sooner. You get some bug, you know it immediately, you fix it immediately, right? Without really deploying into the real environments, you will never actually identify, even if you do 1,000 test cases or test runs in your local environment or any other places in your laptop or wherever it is, you will never be able to find the real issues that you will face or your application will face when it's in the real production environment where the clients are really using it, right? So that's what it is. Fail fast, embrace the failure, right? Learn from failures and focus on shared responsibility. So there were, in the past, there were different teams working. So I'd been, as I told, in 15 years, in my first 10, 12 years, I had been with projects where teams will be independent of each other, right? So there will be a separate development team. There will be a testing team. There will be, again, in testing, you will have lots of subdivides, like uh, teams which are writing functional test cases, teams which are writing, I don't know, UI based test cases. And then you will also have a team for doing releases, like that team will be only deploying what you are giving. Teams that are maintaining the infrastructure, and all these are like independent teams. So what will happen is when something goes wrong in the production, it should come back with all these teams. Each one of them will check whether it's their problem. And most of the time it will be a ping pong. Like he will say, or a blame game. So he will say, it's not my problem, it's your problem, it's your problem, it's my problem. So there is no shared responsibility. At the end of the day, whatever is running in production where the client is using, again, Netflix can be an example. You are using an application in internet. There are so many people using it. So it can be a single team that can take responsibility of that being up and running. It should be a cross shared responsibility across all the teams, right? Now let's go back in time, right? So whatever I explained, let's go back in the past. So this is the very first few years. So these are just developers who build things. They just develop. They do some local testing. It's called unit testing or self-testing. So of course, you develop something. You write a small program, and then you run it yourself. You check whether it meets whatever that you think it should meet. And then once it is done, then you are happy about it. Then you say, my work is done, right? So that's how development team were there in the past. So they will do, okay, their work and they'll say it's done. Okay, now I'm handing over to my next team. As I told, there could be 10 to 15 teams also in a big organization, but I'm simplifying it for this presentation. So this is how it is, right? Next thing is this application is handed over to a testing team, right? And these testers will have series of test cases which is already predefined, and they will execute it one by one. So they would have already did a test planning or test strategy. It will say, okay, this is a test case I should run, and then this is how I'll run it, right? And for each thing they will run, if it's success, green, or it's red, and then they'll send it back to the developers, and it's a cycle again. Like when there's a bug, it goes back to developer fixes, comes back to testing, it goes again back and forth, back and forth. And then at one point of time, they'll come into an agreement, okay, this is fine, there are some bugs, and these bugs are not that important. We'll move it to the customer now to use it, right? Now that's where it's getting delivered to customer, and it's all colorful here, but in reality, they are not that happy, right? Mostly. I'll tell you why. So, and another thing is this whole cycle is not that simple like I explained, right? Normally, when an application is being developed in any organization, I've seen in the past, it will take minimum of 6 months, even for a small screen with two screens. Like if I'm asking you to develop in your lab, you'll be doing it in a week's time. But in reality, for that particular two-screen application to be delivered and to be used by the customer, with so many teams involved and so many processes involved, it takes minimum 6 months for the customer to really use it, to even see it for the first time. Okay. Uh, and 6 months is the minimum I'm talking about. There are projects that runs for 2 years, 3 years, right? And it's a cycle again, but it's a very boring cycle, let me tell you. So you'll work for 3 years on a project, almost doing the same thing, and then at the end of day, when it reaches customers, they may not be that happy about what has been done. So okay, this is for the people who have watched Netflix. So the beginning is the end is the beginning. So if you have not, try to watch it. So after it is delivered to the customer, normally what customers do is customers call the agent, and then there are some L1, L2 agents, the first level, second level, and then it comes to developer if there's a bug fix. If it's something that they can manage, they will explain the customers, etc. This you can compare with any call center that you're calling, and then you are asking for some kind of issues, right? So even similarly, customers who are using the applications will have a contact, how they can contact and they can resolve the issues, right? Now, this is the usual flow. I mean, this is something you guys would have read in SDLC or software development lifecycle. It goes wrong, right? But so this is a very old this is a very old picture, right? I'm not sure if you're looking in mobile how big it can be, but the reality is somebody explains the requirement like this, right? And it turns out to be, and then there is no testing, there is no support. I'll try to go one box at a time. If you guys are in mobile, you may not be able to see everything here. So the first one is how the sponsor explains it. So assume that there's somebody on the client side who is explaining you what is the requirement, right? And then the project manager or the leader is the one who listens to it. And then he understands it to be like this. So here in the first diagram, it says a swing with three seats to sit, right? So that's how the client side contact has explained it, right? And then, but the project leaders assumed it to be a slide, a swing, which is at the center of the tree. You can see it's already, and then it's only one seat there. And then the analyst who is going to, again, another team member is going to listen from the lead. He is understanding it slightly differently. He sees, I don't know, the tree is flying and the swing is in between, right? And then the programmers or the developers programs it, and you see the swing is all on the floor. They don't know what they are doing, but and then the testers, when they receive it, they see the application like this. But the business consultant, again, a guy on the client side, he will think, okay, I will get something like this. Documentation is nothing, as you see. Documentation is not explaining anything that is there. It's just empty. And then what operations install. So this is a team which is actually installing your application, right? So when they install, they get a bits and pieces because of several reasons, and this is what they install. But the customer will be billed the payment that they are doing for the organization that is building. It will be for a bridge, and the support will be like this for a broken tree, right? Support is what the one that I explained when you call and then you try to see whether you can resolve issues. It's as advertised like iSwing delivered it, something like that. But actually, customer needed a tree with a branch and a tire tied to the branch, right? So this looks funny, but it is the reality, right? The reality is like this because, as I mentioned, the duration is so long. So it's 6 months to 2 years to 3 years. What happens is the team members changes, customer side teams are changing, market is changing, requirements are changing, and then but you are developing with a requirement that is like 2 years old, and then with all these changes in between, finally customer is not getting what he needs, right? That is the problem with SDLC. So SDLC is software development lifecycle. I guess this you guys would have studied if you are in CS or IT. But as you see, this is what is wrong with the normal waterfall cycle or SDLC cycle. But I won't say it's completely wrong, but there are some organizations even today who is going to follow this. There are some lots of organizations that are still following it. They're still delivering projects. But eventually people realized maybe there is a better way to do this, right? Uh, so this is a blame game. So somebody in the application side actually is developing, he is just shipping the codes, and the operations team is just installing it. And there is a big wall in between. There's a big wall in between. So they say my responsibility is over whenever I develop something and I gave it to somebody who was putting it into an application. Now my job is over, right? If something goes wrong here, for example, the page is not working, then it's a problem of the operations team and not the developers team. So because of this problem, right, there's lots of ping pong blame games. So things were not really delivered. Even if deliver, if there's a problem, it never gets fixed immediately, right? So this is a problem with following an SDLC and then having the siloed teams that are independently working with their own responsibility. Is it clear so far? Or you guys can unmute now for some time. We can interact to understand whether so far the presentation is clear for you guys. Feel free to unmute, ask me anything. I'm just 15 years older, but I'm from the same college, so you can imagine. Feel free to unmute and talk. I don't mind talking to you. So that
Everything is good.
okay. Thank you. Like somebody is finding funny as well. Thanks. Okay, now why I'm talking about all these theories, right? Because two things. One is to understand the reality. Second thing is to understand the trend that has changed in the past decade, right? This trend is visible to me. I'm not sure how much the syllabus has changed on your guys' side to reflect this trend. But this is the current trend in the organizations, right? So when you go to an interview or something, most probably those organizations will be using the latest trend. Some of them can be using this, but I want you guys to understand how things are moving forward, right? How things have changed over the last 10, 15 years. So that when you guys talk to the other guy, you know about what they are talking, right? I think it's very important in an interview. So try to imagine whatever I explained, but if you guys feel that I want to rephrase something and explain it with some other example, feel free to let me know. Yeah, so you have not understood what is DevOps yet. Okay, now to simplify this, so that's what this screen is about. I see developers and operations team, right? So these are the two silos that I explained. So operations team are the one who installs the applications and manages in a production environment. So I don't know when I say environment, whether you guys are able to understand that word. Environments are nothing but, for example, you have a laptop. So imagine that I'm a developer or you are a developer. You got a laptop or a PC in your organization. You are doing some development activity, right? And there are two possibilities. Either you develop everything in your laptop or your desktop machine, and then you will first deploy it into one server or one application server, web server, whatever your application is all about. And there it is independent of your local system, right? It is common to lots of developers, testers, and everything. Like that, there will be lots of environments that are set. So this is one environment, a set of servers where you can deploy your application and test it in reality, right? So it will have almost identical environment like it's like the customers will use, right? So let's take one example, because depending upon the technology and depending upon the application, this environment could be something else, right? So let's take a web application, right? So let's say you develop a very, very small web application. All it is like you give a name, it will greet you back with the name, right? This web application you are developing in your PC or laptop, right? As a developer in an organization. After that, this application will be taken and deployed into another machine, right? This machine can either be on-premise Unix box or a Unix server running in your office somewhere, or it could be on cloud, right? Somewhere else, right? Remotely. So you deploy it, and then it can run there as well, the same web application. Now there are multiple teams who have access to that server. They can either test or they can either further develop, they can run it, they can validate it, whatever it is. So this environment setup, this set of servers that you are setting up for running your application other than your own laptop or something, it's normally referred to as environment, okay? I'm not sure whether I heard about this word when I'm in college, but this is a word that they will use whenever you go to an organization for sure. So environments, they will say. So they'll call it something as development environment. And there are multiple environments for each of the software lifecycle. Development environment, testing environment. Again, in testing, there will be multiple environments like integration testing environments, system testing environments, functional testing environments. You can name whatever you want, even performance testing. It depends on the organization, right? How many environments they have. And then they will have something called user acceptance environment, where a set of business people within your team who are close to customers will actually test that application from a customer point of view and say whether it's okay, right? And then there will be production environment, right? So production, when we say production, there is a real environment which everybody else is accessing. The actual end users are accessing your application. This web application that I talked about, an application where you give a name and it greets you back. Let's assume you want to publish it like Facebook, right? You just publish it. So Facebook, when you're accessing, it's actually coming up from their production environment. So environment is not a single server. It could be a farm of servers, and it can be located in different geographical locations, supporting different set of customers. And there will be also backup servers running to ensure that the application is always available. So all these are a little complex, but that's how they are ensuring when you are using Facebook or even this Zoom application that we are using, or even Facebook or Netflix. That's how they're making sure it's always available. So it's not a single server that's running somewhere. It's huge number of servers sharing this load. Somehow the customers are redirected to the right set of servers near to my location. They could have a server running in Mumbai to which we are getting redirected when we access Netflix. Somebody in US, they'll be hitting something in North Virginia, right? So these are environments. So the reason why I mentioned about environments is these environments, then it's tied to a team normally, right? So developers will work on development environment. It could be your laptop, desktop, or a separate set of servers given for developers. And then testing environments, as I explained, each of them can be run by different testers, right? And there'll be a separate testing team. They will say, this is my environment, right? And then operations are the one who will be actually maintaining the customer servers that are closer to customers, like the production servers that I explained, right? That is actual real-time server that you are accessing or I am accessing as a customer for any other web application or any application, to be frank. So that is production. And the customer user testing, user acceptance testing, that is UAT in short, people say, user acceptance testing. So all these are normally maintained by a separate team called operations, right? So there will be very careful. So I had been with projects in the past where if I once everything is developed in my all other environment, like development is all fine. I deployed it into testing environment. Lots of people have tested it. They told all these test cases are working fine. Then I'll go talk to operations team. And by looking at the person face, I know this guy is not going to allow my deployment to happen, right? So the way it works is people were so worried about putting something in production in the past because they are very reluctant. They feel that, okay, there could be some bug in this application. Now, if I put it, there could something go wrong for the end user, end customer. And that might mean missing business or loss of brand, right? See, for example, if Netflix is down for 1 hour, you can imagine they'll be losing millions of dollars of money, right? Just for 1 hour, if they are down, they'll be losing millions of dollars of money, right? And their brand, because next day it will be the trending topic wherever you open, Facebook, Twitter, everywhere. It will be a trending topic that Netflix is not available for an hour, right? I think you guys, if you're following tech news, you would have noticed recently Facebook was down for some time. Even Netflix was down for some time. Amazon was down lots of time, you would have noticed. So all these are huge players, right? They have, I don't know, thousands, tons of 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 servers running to support their application. But can you imagine how many deployments Netflix will do in a day? I want you guys to put it in the chat that what do you guys think about it? How many deployments Netflix do in the production environment? So I explained what is production environment. That's the environment you're watching your movies or videos, right? Can you guys guess how many deployments Netflix will do? How frequent and how many deployments that they are doing? Just guess it. It can be any number. I'm not going to make note of your name. Guys, feel free to just put it in the chat. That way, I don't feel like I'm talking all alone here. 1 to 5, around 2K, Shivaram Kumar. Devika mentioned 1 to 5, Uday 20. Okay, go ahead, please, guys. I have 100 participants. I think that's the limit, and that's why it's just 100. But 5 to 10, okay. 100 times, okay. Go ahead, just put, I mean, if you are listening to this video still, unless you guys have just left the video on, but if you are still listening to this, just put everything. I just want to know how people, 2 to 3 billion, Dilip, is it for a day? You are guessing, or 50 to 10, A2, Bindu says 50 to 75, approximately 10, 500. I don't know whether Zoom has this toll kind of thing. If it's there, it'll be interesting. No, it's not there. Okay. Okay. 500 by Sai Kishore. Sai around 10 to 50. Shubham 1 to 10. Rajesh approximately 50. Rahul 1K. Approximately 1000. 5K. Where we become 50 to 70. 50 to 70. Every 15 seconds, they did it. Okay. 5 to 20. Okay, MIA2. I don't know, some secret agent, I think. MIA2. 5 to 20. Okay. Okay, so I think that's where it stops. So very good guesses. I see the guess starts from every 20 seconds. Okay, so the guess starts from 5 or 2 per day to, what was that, 5 billion? What was that in billion? I forgot. It was 2 to 3 billion. Okay, we really wish, Dilip, but 2 to 3 billion is really huge. Okay. So that, okay, in reality, they do at least 30,000 to 40,000 deployments in a day in the production environment. Okay. So things are getting deployed, things are getting updated, uploaded in the background while you're watching a video or a movie without any interruption for you. And stills are getting upgraded. Things are getting upgraded, updated every uh, like 30 to 40,000 times a day. This wasn't possible a decade back, right? So if you have heard about the term OTT, right? They are called on the top players, right? This Facebook, Google, Amazon, Netflix, all these are on the top players, right? The reason is they are actually dealing with this huge number of community of people interacting with them in reality, right? Because in the past also we used to have web application, but those are mostly blogs. Like 15 years back, I'm telling, that's where I got the first internet access for 1 hour. In some symposium, I won uh, some coupon to access internet for 1 hour. So I went outside to some cafe and then I accessed. Uh, so at the time when you see any website, those websites are mostly blogs. What is called blogs today, right? These are static information. You have set of information on a page hosted. You just scroll through it, read it, like news pages that you see, etc. They are not as interactive as Facebook or Netflix or Amazon, right? There were no applications like that at that time. So when these applications come into picture, the SDLC cycle that I explained, right, which will take 2 years for a change to come or 6 months for a single change to really get deployed to production, it wasn't working for them because they want to run, they want to handle these many millions of customers, billions of customers across the globe, and they can't wait for a change for 6 months, right? So they have to do things faster. So things started, then people started thinking about better ways of doing things, right? Now, coming back to the word DevOps, I know somebody asked what is DevOps. I didn't still understand. So all these I explained so that you understand what is developer, what is a developer, and what is an operation team, right? So developer is the one who develops, right? So for now, let's assume even testers are part of this team, and then the operations are the one who manages and maintains the application in the upper environments, like user acceptance environment or production environments, right? So they are responsible for deploying it. If something goes down, if some page is not accessible, they are the one who will get a call in the middle of the night. They'll have to wake up and they'll have to fix anything or try to provide some kind of workaround or redeploy everything, bring up a new server, all these things they do. That's what the operations team do, right? So because of these differences and the ping pong, that's main reason why there was a delay in the whole thing. So developers were more concentrated on the features to be delivered. Operations teams were more concentrated on stability of the application, right? One is new features versus stability. These big players needed both, right? So we need to bridge the gap. So developers and operations together is called DevOps. So, so that's what it's as simple as that, right? Developer plus operation. So dev plus ops is DevOps. Okay. So what does it mean? It's not a single team with all of them together. It is breaking this wall. It is making sure everything goes faster, right? I'll anyway explain about with examples in the following slides, but that's what it's all about in simplicity, right? Developers and operations somehow interacts and takes a shared responsibility of the application running in production. So if a Netflix goes down for some reason, it will not be only the operations teams of Netflix will receive a call in the midnight, even the developers will receive the call, right? Because they know the application better or the code that they have written better. Operations know about the servers and the configurations better. So these guys should actually sit together to resolve it immediately, right? So that's in its simplest form, right? Now, as I told, that's a blame game, right? So operations comes back always. Developer says it's working in my laptop, and operations will say, no, it's not working in the production environment. I don't care because development environment is mine. So that ping pong is what we want to avoid when the culture of DevOps is being brought in, right? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now let's come back to the time in right now. What we are trying to do, right? How the industry is moving towards. Lots of industry has already adapted it, right? So again, coming back to the infinity symbol. Now, what is this, right? So we have these let me show you 1 second. Just give me a second. Let me quickly check something. I don't know why some slides were. Let me quickly show this slide so that. So the past process was something like this, right? Requirements will be gathered, design will be done. Design is again a huge document. So requirement gathering is again a document. We used to call it business requirements document with 200, 300 pages minimum. It has to be minimum 200, 300 pages. And then this document will be given to design team who will do all this class diagram, UML diagrams, everything. Again, it will take a few months. Then it will be given to development team who will develop it, which will be handed over to testing team, and then deployment. Deployment is done by the operations team. Then the maintenance, when this maintenance comes once after the application is in production, right? And this will have all ping pongs, like it's a problem with design, development will say, testers will say it's a problem with development, requirements, and then everybody will blame the requirement and things like this. And another slide I want to show is the agile process. I don't know why this got hidden. So now SDLC, software development lifecycle, it's mostly following the waterfall cycle model. So another kind of methodology is agile methodology, right? This I think you guys would have heard. Let me know if you guys would have heard. Guys, you are still hearing me and seeing me, or seeing the screen at least?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir.
Yeah. So agile you would have heard, which is that transition from this, from that single line SDLC like this to something that is repetitive, right? So it's the same thing, but we'll do it in sprints. So sprints, there is an example of a Scrum methodology. Scrum is a concept in football, right? But a sprint is a small, frequent deployments that we do, right? So sprint is defined in each organization in a different way, different frequently. For example, some organization will say I have 2-week sprints, right? Some organization will be 3-week sprint. Some organization will have 1-month sprint, whatever it is. The point is, take a small feature, develop, test, build everything you do, and then deploy it, right? Or launch it within that sprint. So can you imagine in 2 weeks, we'll deliver something and deploy it into production, right? And only then you'll be able to deploy so much faster, right? So that's why the agile methodology came. So they told, I will talk about agile methodology maybe sometime. I don't know when, if I interact with you guys, but so it talks about not making too much bigger documentations. And the advantage of making things delivered within 2 weeks, right? Even if it's a small feature, you get the feedback from the real customers quickly. So you can always change it back, right? So people realize it's not about meeting the right requirement, doing the right development, or doing the right design. It's all about doing it faster, getting the feedback, and then doing it again, right? So just imagine if you can write your exams within 10 minutes, your teacher sits in front of you, and then she immediately corrects and say, okay, this is wrong. Again, correct it and give it back to me. Imagine things like that. So you get immediate feedback of what you're doing, and then you respond back immediately. That way you can make things much more clear, right? So it's the same. I don't know whether that's going to happen with the exams, but here in the industry, this is happening, right? Yes. I don't know, other guy named Narayanan is responding. Yes, you're right. So waterfall is one of the methodology. Agile is one of the methodology, right? So waterfall is just falling from top, going in sequence, then dropping is where the deployment happens. Agile is doing it in cycle. It's again iteration based methodology, you can say. You keep iterating what you're doing, right? So okay, why I talked about it. So this is how we started realizing we should be able to deploy and deliver faster. There could be some problems, but it will be fixed also immediately. You will deliver immediately, you will find problems immediately, you will fix immediately. That's the basis, right? Now it's the same thing in DevOps, right? In DevOps, see, when we say you want to do something in 2 weeks, it's not that easy, because things that you are doing for 6 months, minimum 6 months, how can you speed it up by 2 weeks? It's not about increasing the number of people in the team. Sometimes it's not happen. I mean, it's not a solution, right? You can't just put 2000 people in a team and deliver something. You can't just keep track of who is doing what and really making an application that has a single goal. If 2000 people are working, I'm sure the application will never be built. You can't have more than like uh, for a good application 25 30. I've seen like 150 people in a very huge project that runs for 2 years, but uh, not more than that. Like you can put 2000 3000. So how you can make it faster, right? You need set of tools and applications that can make things faster for you, right? You remove manual intervention as much as possible. That way things becomes faster, right? Human beings have our own limitations of how fast we can do a thing, right? But of course you hand it over to a machine. That machine in our language, a computer or a program or whatever it is, or application, it can do much faster. And they are stupid boxes. So once you define it right, then they are going to repeat it again and again without errors. Then you can remove the human error. So humans normally cannot repeat the same thing again and again without errors. So because we are humans, so which is normal. So that's how we remove this. So this cycle is very similar to agile. So the cycle is uh, where we do first called planning. And there are some tools we use. I thought I will also include it in this slide so that you guys know what is being used in the industry. But these are not the only tools, right? It depends on the organization what other tools that they can use, right? So the first one is about planning. So planning is about forming the requirement, what has to be done, what needs to be delivered in this sprint for next 2 weeks or next 3 weeks, whatever it is. We normally do it in Jira, or there are lots of other applications as well. And then development, coding. You do the development in your local, you use lots of programming languages. Then you have a software configuration management, source code management, which is Git or your Bitbucket, or again, lots of tools are available. And then building it, Jenkins or Hudson, it's called Hudson a decade back, but then it became Jenkins as an open source. Hudson is still owned by IBM. So this is again a continuous integration tool, they call it, but it's used for basically building your application very quickly, right? So as I told before, there were also a release team. You develop all the code, right? You will give it to the release team. They will build that code, form and war file or a jar file, and then they will deploy it, right? So that team has been not removed. They'll be spread across to other teams, and then this build process has been brought in, which this tool called Jenkins will take care of that, right? You are committing your code into Git. Like you push your code, you do all the development, you commit, you say this code is fine, and then it automatically builds it. It automatically deploys to a development environment or a test environment, right? And maybe it will also run some tests automatically, right? That's again a topic for another day. But this is the build process now, automated build process, right? This is important because you can't wait for a person to build and stuff. You can't deliver anything in 2 weeks if you have such a setup. And then there are other tools when we talk about build, Docker, Kubernetes, you would have heard it here and there. So these are containerization and container orchestration tools. This solving another issue. Like I talked about environments, right? Like development, testing environments, production environments. There were possibilities. The environments are not exactly the same. For example, you will have an environment. It's not just the difference between number of CPUs or memories that is there in the production environment and in your local laptop, but also the dependencies and DLLs. That reminds me, when I was doing my final year project, we were developing it in my friend's computer. He was staying in Avadi, and then we used to go to his house and we used to do our final year project in his computer, and everything was working. I think it was based on Visual Basic, and you have no idea. I don't know whether you guys are using Visual Basic, but you have no idea. This needs lots of dependent DLL files and everything. It can have a very good setup package like Wizard to install the application, uh, but you can never guarantee it will work in another PC. Okay. So after developing everything, we realized it. I realized it because we did also a demo sometime back. Then we realized, okay, maybe it will not work. So we decided we'll take the whole CPU. I don't know whether CPUs are this big anymore, but we took the whole CPU from my friend's room to Veltech Engineering College to the lab room. We got a permission to keep it there. We told we don't know whether our application will work anywhere else because there are lots of different DLLs and libraries and file. So we want to have this. We also had a CD with all things written there, but still we were not sure whether it will work. So we took the whole CPU. We went to the room. You know what happened? It didn't work in that PC as well because the PC was not booting anymore. Because we took it 5 kilometers in a bike, so it wasn't working anymore. So what we did was in the CD, luckily I also recorded the whole project, doing all the functionalities in the project. I recorded a video and saved it. So that's what we showcased. So it's quite possible that practical person could have flunked me. She told boss, you are not worth it. But luckily they believed that we had put that effort in developing that application. Otherwise, maybe I'm not will not be talking here. So it happens, right? So that's the problem. So things working in a particular environment may not work in the same way in another environment. And this was also another bigger problem the industry was facing some time back. And then came Docker, right? Docker is nothing but, for now, for simplicity, let me explain. You imagine as a zip file or archive file. You put everything into it, zip it, then you give it. Then when you extract, you have everything that you need, right? It's the worst way to explain what is Docker, but I don't want to complicate you guys with anything else in this session. So that's where Docker became popular. So you put everything in a single image or a single container, ship it across, and that way you can. We have videos in my YouTube channel about detailing it, but I don't know about you guys how much you know about, so I don't want to explain in detail. If you guys want to follow, you can check that. And then the Kubernetes is for orchestrating it. For now, let's keep it that simple. But if you want, do contact me in any other medium, and then I'll explain you in detail. So I don't want to bore other guys if they have not heard about it. So testing. So after building, then comes the testing. So here Selenium is one popular tool for doing functional testing, which will automatically open the web applications. It can go to a particular part of your screen and see whether things are working. For example, I gave an example of a web application, right? Where you can feed your name and then the application actually spits out the name again. That's the simple application that you built in the beginning of this session, right? In Selenium, what you can do, instead of having a person to open that application, feed in a name and check whether in the GUI that name is coming, like let's say you type Narayanan and then you get the feedback, hello Narayanan, right? As simple as that. That web application is a very simple one. Now, if in old days, you will have a tester who will actually click the application, he will type a name, and again, you will have a test case which would have given a name. It would have given John, then he will type only John. So he will type John, he will see hello John coming up, good. If he types John, and then instead of capital letters that is there in the test line, if it's coming in small letter, he will say it's wrong. So that's how the testers were, human beings. Now, this can be replaced by using Selenium, right? It's not about replacing the person, it's replacing that functionality of the person, right? That activity that the person was doing, which is very repetitive activity, can be replaced by this tool. And that person can either be the developer who is actually bringing up new features, or it can be the operations who is maintaining the stability of the application, right? So Selenium is to replace that. You automate this, you record the screen, you say this is where my hello name will come, that variable you can pass, and then it will automatically pass the value, press the button for you, it will give the output, right? So that's Selenium. There are lots of tools. Selenium is one example of it. Next, you release. So there's a difference between release and deployment. I'll explain you a little later, right? This is a little confusing, but for now, releasing it, once your software is ready, then it is called a release. Ready to be deployed, then it's called a release. Let's take an example. You go to some application, for example, VLC. I think most of you guys would have used VLC player or even this Zoom application. You can take anything. You go to the download page, they will have different versions of the application available, right? So that is released, right? And then once you download it and deploy it, then it becomes deployed into your laptop and then it's usable. But all those versions that you can see are reusable or usable versions, meaning they are stable versions that you can use, things that you can really use, right? So this is not something which is being developed when you are doing it, right? So this is called release. So when you release, whatever you have done so far is ready for use, is releasing. And then the next step is deploying, right? I don't want to get into details about these tools. These are configuration management tools. We can see a little later. So releasing and then deploying. So again, you can use Jenkins also to release and deploy as well. And these are tools that are a little sophisticated, can do some kind of additional configuration in your machine, right? And then you do operate. So operations team I explained, right? And that's where the operation teams use. They also use Jira or even ServiceNow, lots of ticket raising tools and lots of other tools we use day in, day out. But and then monitor. So this is important. So once your application is there in the live environment, we don't want a person to keep sitting and looking at the application, whether it's working or not, right? You can't have that. So you need some kind of monitoring applications that monitor for you, right? So they will keep looking at the CPU utilization of your machine. They will look at number of errors generated in your application. They will look at the anomalies of the errors. Like normally, like 20 errors will come in a day, but suddenly 20,000 errors coming. Okay, something is wrong. Then they will automatically, the application will automatically make a call to the develop operations team on-call person, the person who is responsible for that day. And then it will also call the developer, possibly, it depends on the organization. They will get a call, then of course the people will come in, they will check what is wrong, whether it should be improved or the alert should be disabled because it's usual normal, right? And this goes in a cycle. So based on the monitoring, you find some bugs or you find some ways to enhance, then it comes back again to planning, right? So that is a cycle. So this whole cycle as being a cycle, and this way the developers and the operations are interacting together in all the layers, and everything is happening so fast, right? And developer can't say it working in my machine, I don't care if it's not working in operation. Operation can't say I will never release a new version of a software immediately, right? Because all of these are automated. Automatically everything is deployed. Operations is to just to maintain the latest version is okay. If there's any problem, again there's a possibility in the tool to roll back immediately, right? By increasing the velocity of all these activity, by increasing the frequency of doing all these activities as well, the whole process has been even the process looks complex, but once it is done and set, it's a program that is it's like a process, automated process that is running all the time, right? Then you do only little part of what you have to do, then everything else is in play automatically, right? And this is very important to understand in DevOps. Okay, so DevOps as a culture needs these processes and tools to implement that culture. The culture only says I should have shared responsibility. Culture says you should fail fast, right? But how can that happen? You need support of all the tools and processes, right? The Agile is a process that can support it. These are a set of tools that can support it. But DevOps is not a tool. DevOps is not a process, right? DevOps is a culture, a mindset. It's a collaboration, right? I'm going to pause here. I want you guys to relax for some time. Let me know if you have any questions here so that we can discuss that. Anything, any basic questions you can ask, we can discuss. Be open because I would have asked much more stupid questions to everybody else. Yeah, that's my bot. He's just my friend. I asked him so that if somebody is asking any questions while I'm talking, he will answer, but never mind, I will also answer. So feel free to ask any questions. Anything, guys, ping it in the chat. If you want to unmute and talk, feel free to talk.
Even if it is very small and silly questions.
Yeah, feel free. I mean, you can't imagine
He's
how.
just using here.
Yeah, you can't imagine the stupid questions I have asked in my career. So, still asking, how many responsibilities can a person handle in maximum using this DevOps? Venkat Rajeshwari Karnam. Can you rephrase it, or can you, if you can talk, maybe we can understand you better. So it's not about responsibilities. Again, it's a shared responsibility, as I told. Like everybody owns everything here, right? And then everybody is responsible for everything. So automatically, what happens is developer will not focus on developing something in his laptop. If everything working fine, I'm okay. he will be worried because he will get a call if something goes wrong in production, right? Yeah, good. If you are unmuted, you can talk. No problem.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, what my basic question is, if we take a programmer and he programs it, or a developer who develops it, and will at this time they have a full-time work that they have to do. Apart from that, if they take part in other operations as well, like operation or deployment, so what is the maximum number of things he can be involved in?
Yeah,
That's
very
what
good
my
question.
basic question is.
Yeah, very good question. Okay, so it's what happens is, so when you develop, right, you will have a set of things that you have to develop, right, and then you will have, as you told, a full-time work in developing something and delivering something. What they do normally is they identify somebody called on-call person, right? On-call is it goes in shifts, right? So if there is a team member, if there's a team with 10 people, right, what they'll do is there is this person, he is responsible for the 1 week time. So for that 1 week, he will have very less development activity, and then he will be involved when there is an issue. He will be involved, right? But it will not be very frequent, because most of the time they will actually roll back and they will inform you, but sometimes they will involve you in the actual operations. So this guy who will have reduced work during that week, it could be a week, it could be a month, it depends on the organization. They will say this one person will be there and there will be a backup person for him if he is not available. These two people will be identified in the team, and this will go in cycle, meaning if there are 10 people named 1 to 10, so number 1 and 2 will be the on-call person for the first week, and then 3 and 4 will be for the next week, 5 and 6 will be for the next week. So they will take turns like this, right? And it's not that you should be always available. When I say available, you need not be always in touch with them. If there is a problem, you will be called, you'll be provided a mobile in which they can contact you, or a SIM card, and then you will have to respond to them and help them in resolving it. That's the only thing. So it's not that you'll be doing it full time, but when there is a need, you have to be there. And again, only a set of people will be identified in cycle at a point of time. At that time, they will also plan it like, okay, this guy is going to be a support, so it's possible he will get a call. So I'll only give him 50% of work, right? So on a single day, if there's some problem in production, he's sitting there for a whole day, right? Then he can very well inform to the team manager or lead, explaining that I was there in this production issue. Everybody will be aware when something is wrong in production. You don't have to even explain, okay? So they will be explained, okay, I was there for the whole day, so that's why my 50% of work yesterday I couldn't complete. Well enough, fair. So that's where the blameless culture is also coming in DevOps, right? So people will not blame you for not doing anything if you have a justification why you couldn't do it, right? So there are times in the past I've seen people will be questioned for everything. So if there is a bug, they will trace it back to the code which developer developed that line, and then they will tag that person as, okay, you are responsible for this issue. This was happening in the past, but it's never the case now. I'm just telling, so that is also gone. So that's again the cultural change or the mindset change. It's no more blame, right? So everybody started embracing the failure. It's possible the application will fail. There are possibilities bugs will be there. So you can imagine Google developers are amazing, but there are lots of thousands, millions of bugs available in Google, just that you're not hitting it. Okay, so it's this, people should, once they start embracing this, they remove this blameless they start coming to this blameless culture, and they start removing this ping ponging. They start removing and start believing the person for whom he is, and open for failures, then things all goes away, right?
Thank you very much for answering this, sir.
Yeah, welcome. Yeah, hope it clarifies, huh?
Yes, sir.
So there was one more question, I think. Okay, which language is now trending? Python, C, or C++? Which one has better scope for future? Uh, it depends on the field that you're trying to be. In DevOps, I have seen people using Python more than others, but there are lots of applications still using C, C++. So it's not there. It is, but I have seen, at least in Indian organizations that I have worked, not many. I've seen Python being used compared to Python and C++, but everything is there. Java is being used, .NET is being used. everything is being used. But if you want to come to DevOps, maybe Python could be a good start. But C++ is always the basics, right? The logics, the operations, it's all more or less shared. You will just get rid of the pointers, but which will come back if you're learning Go language. But other than that, everything will be mostly same. So don't worry about the languages. To be frank, as I told, again coming back, I was more interested in C, C++ when I was out of college. I was more proficient in that. I hated Java. Then for 13 years, I was working in Java. Out of which 7 years, I was a Java architect. So it doesn't matter which technology you are choosing. You understand the logic, basics, algorithms, and then I think you are fine. You can easily adapt to a new programming language because things changes. So new things are coming in every day, so it doesn't matter. Okay, other question was around the top overlay technique. To be frank, I don't know it. So you know better than me in that respect. I've not heard of top overlay technique, to be frank. But why we came to know that Netflix every second undo it by top overlay technique or something like, so why they do it? Shivam, but I couldn't follow your question. Why they do it? What is that? You can unmute if you want to talk. Yeah, our language is also there. Yeah. Why every day and every second they require? So there are two parts of it. So there are a few things my colleague is answering. So there are two parts to it, right? Why they do such frequent deployments. So there are two things. One is they will be maintaining lots of applications. So it's not just the front end application that you're seeing, right, where the video is playing. So let's just imagine. So it could be the thumbnails that you're seeing on the screen, right? These thumbnails will be generated by a separate set of application. So there will be applications which are actually encoding this into different formats, like you're watching in mobile, you're watching in laptop, and there are applications that are actually caching it or servers that are caching it. And you might need patches to it, you might need bug fixes to it, and there are several teams, huge number of teams across the globe who is developing and delivering it. So eventually for each of these applications, so many changes, then you add together, you have so many deployments that you'll be doing, right? It's not just a single application, Netflix. It's part of a huge ecosystem with so many applications, right? And servers. So these deployments can also be for maintaining the servers, patching it, etc. Yeah, it also about the content, licensing and information, right? Netflix is a very good thing. There are lots of there are lots of articles that Netflix has published, Netflix engineers have published about their architecture, how they are maintaining their stability, etc., etc. So you guys just look over it on internet. You will find lots of good applications that explains in large scale how they are actually managing the application. But I'm sure they will not talk about this whole thing. They will talk about one application, one server, one architecture, how they are doing it, right? Similar for Amazon. You can imagine like so many people are buying there and then still it's
So
all.
how they,
Hmm.
sir, how they will manage the backend codings for the application so
Who is this?
frequently? Sir, Shivam.
Shivam. Yeah, Shivam. How they will manage the
Backend codings for the application.
manage means
I
where they
mean,
will store
codes are changed so much frequently.
yeah.
They need to deploy it and upload to somewhere, Play Store or something.
Yes, application. Yeah,
So
application
how
changes,
they
right?
manage the backend codings?
Yeah. So your software application or whatever you are developing, right? So again, I don't know exactly how Netflix works because I don't work there, but in general, the way it is being done in the industry is this cycle, right? So everything that the developer commits, it goes to a particular source code repository, right? Source code management application where it is stored, right? Now there are multiple things that happens from there, which some of these things could be automatic, like whenever somebody pushes a code, immediately a trigger from here will actually invoke a set of test cases to be automatically run, which will automatically invoke packaging this application, which will automatically invoke deploying it to a lower environment, right? Which can eventually have some kind of security gates and things that are being run even before deploying it to production, right? So all these can happen on the fly. For things that are well tested, following well standards, they will even deploy it without anybody being intervening. Like you commit a code, it gets deployed to production. And there are some applications, there will be, they would have actually categorized. They will say, okay, these applications, somebody has to manually validate because the functionality is new. And also based on the functionality, right? If there's a new thing that they are coming up with, then maybe they will take little bit time. But for the small bug fixes and small enhancements that they're doing, like for example, the theme that they're changing, things like this, they will deploy immediately because, and they will roll it out carefully, right? If there are like million servers they have to roll out, they will make sure that there are multiple ways to roll out also, blue-green deployments, like you bring up a new stack, deploy everything, replace the stack. Or you bring up one node down or one instance down, deploy everything there, up it up, and then bring down the next down. So for some people, there will be a new theme. For some people, it will be an old theme. But eventually, it will get rolled out to everybody. Okay. So it is like, you can imagine your mobile Android getting updates, right? Similar to that. So you might be getting it in one time, other person might be getting it another time. But eventually, everybody will be rolled out. But it's not automatic. I'm just telling. Similarly, they will upload it. The advantage is it's all running in their servers. They don't have to deliver it to your laptop or your mobile. They have to update it in their servers, and then all you are doing is accessing that server, right? Some of them could be cached content. You'll be seeing something little old because from a cache server, and then contents are replaced, and then the cache will be reset, etc. There are lots of concepts around it, but this is how it's handled. Yeah.
Sir, one more doubt.
Yeah.
Suppose, sir, a user is requesting some data from database,
Yes.
and at the same time, Netflix data gets updated.
Right.
So it will show some errors or something. So how they manage all the things? I mean, sir, frequency of deploying the data is too much frequent, and uploading data and requesting something. How they all manage it?
Yeah. Again, I can't say Netflix, but in general, there are again multiple ways to do this, right? So one way is, for example, it's not a single database anymore, right? There will be huge number of databases running just for production. Okay. For multiple reasons, for higher availability, so that if one server is down, other server will take it up, right? And another will be standby and warm, meaning active and passive servers will also be there, right? So it will be like standby servers. So you'll be accessing one server, and then there'll be another server which is standby. When this goes down, that will be coming from the other one, right? So what they will do is they will keep sometimes the stale data as well. As I mentioned, some data will be cached. There are lots levels of caching. So it's not just web page caching. It's not just your video buffering or something. It could be the query caching, right? When you query an application server, database server, it can also be cached. Results can be cached. The queries can be already pre-planned so that the queries are not completely recompiled, right? So they will, for a moment of time, you will be still accessing the old data, right? Once you are requesting a new request, in the meantime, they'll replace the servers, or they will have maybe additional columns, which they will switch over, and that way you will get the other data, right? This again, as I told, there is no single way how an organization can do it. There are multiple ways to do it. It depends on the kind of data, kind of database they are using, right? SQL, MySQL, and all those kind of different providers from there, right? And then it also depends on the data, whether you're talking about video data, binary data, stored as a blob, or it could be an image, or it could be a text like your name, your age. It depends on all these parameters, how it is being done. So it's all completely different. And again, no single person will know how all these things are handled, because again, as I told, in a large organization, there will be a single person who will be responsible for that database. So maybe set of tables, set of clusters will be responsible for a set of people, and then remaining will be responsible for another team. That's why the microservices come into picture. Though a small functionality in Netflix, just your profile page in Netflix could be handled by a separate team. Okay, maybe one or more teams, right? So you can imagine how things will be divided. For cyber security, is the DevOps needed? It's the other way around, right? So for DevOps, cyber security is important, but cyber security is very, very specific field, right? But security as such is important for any application that's other than if you're running an application locally only for you in your laptop when you are not connected to internet, then you don't need any security, right? Other than that, for any application, you need lots of security best practices you should do. And normally these are even included in this stage itself, right? When you change a code and commit, there will be, again, there are lots of tools available which can validate for vulnerabilities in your code, potential bugs in your code that can lead to hacks, right? There are also tools like this available which can automatically highlight when you immediately code, it will say, was this code has a problem? Like you have kept this particular thing open, or you're using this library which has a vulnerability, don't use this. Or it can even say this code, you have written it this way so that somebody can hack into your application. So all these are available. So security is always used from the beginning. So I won't say for to be in the cybersecurity field, whether you need to know DevOps, I don't think so. But to be part of DevOps team, it's better to know about security and stuff like that. Again, don't get overwhelmed by all the tools that I'm explaining, the overall process that I'm explaining. Not everybody will expect that you need to know everything, right? I'll come to that little later. So you should know a little bit about it, and then of course when you into the organization, as I told, every organization is different for several reasons. Once you're into it, you will understand it better. So people expect that you understand the concepts better, that you will be able to explain things better, and try to be honest. Will mechanical students be stable in software industry after placed in software industry? I'll give you examples of my friends who completed from mechanical engineering. They are doing much greater than me in software industry. You can't imagine. Okay, so it doesn't matter in which field you have studied. So you can always go to the software. I think it's the same. If you're in software, if you're interested in mechanical field, why not? I think it's all about the skill that you develop over it and the interest that you have. It should not be like, okay, everybody's going in IT, so I'll go in IT, right? Have that passion, and then of course, it doesn't matter. You'll be shining. Lots of people in my team. You can imagine maybe a couple of people are from computer science, IT, but everybody else could be from another field, another stream. So it doesn't matter who will be heading DevOps, right? So okay, if you're talking about again the roles within the team, again it depends on the organization, but normally they'll be called DevOps engineers, release engineers, DevOps leads. There could be architect. I'm I'm an architect within my team. There could be some team managers, right? Some team leads, release engineers, release leads. You can have directors, you can have VPs within the team. It depends on the organization. There is no single way who will be heading it. So, but finally it comes to IT. So if you're talking about who is like in the top, it's CTO. So like COO, CEO, CTO, Chief Technology Officer he's in the top of the hierarchy, if that's what you're asking. It's very interesting to see you guys all, but mechanical students, all these concepts don't know how they know, sir. That's only mechanical students learning 1 or 2 languages, which will be useful in job. No, you can learn. So it's not that I understand computer science and IT gives lots of basics. They understand things better because they have this background to start with. But it's within few months you will catch up. As I told, if you have the passion to understand, don't worry, start learning about it now. I mean, to be frank, guys, after this decade, right? When I was there, internet is like available in the college for 1 hour after 5 o'clock, right? I mean, it's not a problem with the college. It's the case everywhere because too costly. But now it's available everywhere. You get free internet in mobile. I mean, there are so many resources available in internet where you can read about this concept. Everybody explains it in a different way. Read 2-3 ways and then try to understand what they're explaining rather than remembering what they're understanding, right? When you remember, you forget. When you understand, you never forget, right? So try to understand that concept. It's very important. It doesn't matter whether you are, yeah, it's there in the first slide, Deepak, WhatsApp number. Doesn't matter if you're from mechanical. Don't worry. I mean, there is a syndrome called imposter syndrome. Have you guys heard about it? It's not just within just because you are out of mechanical, but imposter syndrome. It's very common in IT field. Like every person in IT field thinks the other person knows more technology than you, right? Or more things than you. It is very normal. It's a kind of syndrome, you can say. Everybody has it. Even I have. Even I feel my colleagues know better than me. Everybody has it. The reason is the technology or the IT is so broad. There are so many things available, which you'll see in the next slide. That it's impossible for a human being to know everything, right? It's impossible in your lifetime to know about it. So there are possible that the person next to you knows something else that you don't know, and it's possible that you know something else than he knows. So it applies to you also. If you're out of mechanical, you would have studied about some technologies, but the other people will know something else. Doesn't matter. But once you're into the job, once you have the passion, you will be okay. Don't worry. Every organization, yeah, that's also there. There are organizations that will train you in the initial months. So so Kasturi, maybe you can answer. I don't know whether slides will be circulated. If it will be circulated, then it's fine.
Yeah, you can share me the PPT to my email ID.
Sure.
I'll share to them. For those who registered with me with their email ID, I will share it to them.
Okay, sure. Deepak,
And
anyway,
also
I will
the
show
session
my
that is
first
being
slide. Yeah.
recorded- The
Go
session
ahead,
that
go
is
ahead.
being recorded, that also can be sent along with the PPT.
Sure. Deepak, I will anyway show my first slide at the end, so you can check. As I told, I'm easily available. I will just type it here for everyone. I'm available in the social networking at Naren. Right? Everywhere in LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. So feel free to ping me, right? Anything. Okay. So even if you have, even if it's WhatsApp is little not very interesting, but you can ping me any of this, even on WhatsApp, and I will try to respond. Okay. I know I mentioned everyone. I don't know whether you guys. Yeah. So that's my ID everywhere with double H at the end. Okay, so let's proceed. Very good questions, guys. So keep that coming. So very important to understand how the industry works, right? That's where I felt the gap. So you guys should. Let's moving on. Okay, now this is just to freak everybody out. So this nothing but a cloud native landscape developed by Cloud Native Computing Foundation. It just collects all the tools that are being used by used when you want to do it in cloud, or even mostly used on-prem as well. And they have categorized it into database, streaming, etc. The gray ones are paid ones. The non-gray ones are free. So again, same thing. Don't get overwhelmed with all these things that are available in internet, right? There are so many things available. Don't worry about it. Take a small path, follow a learning path, try to understand it in a single sequence, right? And then try to go ahead. Try to understand everything on your path. Contact everybody who wants. So you can't do it in a single day. So don't try to speed up things. Go it in its own space. Once you understand it, move to the next one. Again, don't go very deep. Like I want to be expert in this particular language forever. Like don't go very deep and don't get lost. Try to cover the breadth, but again understand everything. Don't go for every tool that is there. Just don't look at internet and see, okay, there's a new tool coming in, let me try it. Then you will keep trying new tools, you will never know anything about it, right? About anything, to be frank. Okay, so within DevOps there are two concepts. When you say DevOps, people will tell you, so I just want to mention that if it's too much, it's okay, but you will understand it eventually. So this is a thing that we talked about, right? Coding is there, building application, testing, releasing, and then deploying. So the three things that I want to talk about is continuous integration, which is nothing but continuously integrating your code with other developers and also getting a feedback about your development quickly, right? So this is where you code and then the build is automatically happening. There are some automatic unit test cases running, right? And then you get this continuous thing, right? This goes again and again. So this is a continuous integration. So two developers developing. Imagine developer one, he developed some code, he committed. Developer 2, he took the same code, he did some modification, he committed. Now, his first test case of developer 1 might get failed, right? This will be known only when there is a continuous integration. Otherwise, you will deliver, somebody else will make a change, then their change will work, but your change will fail. You will miss it. So that's why this continuous integration concept came in. I don't want to go about the definition, but you can read it later. The continuous delivery, it's the same thing. As I told, the one thing is about releasing the software. Second thing is actually deploying it, right? Sometimes it's used invariably, but it's okay. For the scope of this session, let's understand releasing is just making your application ready. So that is continuous delivery. Your application is ready to be deployed. That version is ready to be deployed. Now, whether this will be rolled out immediately, there could be several reasons. You might have to delay it because it's an holiday next day. You might have to delay it because you don't want that version already in production. Like there are several reasons why you will not deploy something, but you will already build it and keep it ready, and that is releasing, right? And this process of doing it again and again is called continuous delivery, right? The next one is continuous deployment, which is the actual deployment, right? You frequently do deployments into the production. So the 30,000, 40,000 deployments of Netflix is this. They do deployments continuously into their live environment, right? Okay, the next thing is DevOps career roadmap. So here I would like to give you guys a view about if you want to take DevOps as a career once you're out of your college, right? What is your path you should take? Either if you're out of your college or if you're doing something else in IT already, I don't know whether it's only students here or it's people also other than students joining. Then if you're already in IT, if you're in another career, but if you want to come to DevOps, what are different tools, processes, things that you should know so that you can understand what that actual DevOps as a culture requires from an individual or skills that are required to be part of it, right? Okay, so there's something that I was putting together last week. I have also created a video around this in my YouTube channel. You can scan this QR code for that. So I categorize this into two. There are lots of DevOps roadmaps available online, but some of them are like licensed and then like some hidden copyrights. But this is something that I prepared. It's open. If you want to take a picture of it, circulate it, whatever you want to do. Take a screenshot, circulate it, I don't mind, right? And once the PPT is available, also copy paste and circulate it and do understand. So as a beginner to be part of DevOps, you should know something about development, right? So development basics. So this is like shell scripting, like bash script or any other shells. Python scripting, as I explained, Python is widely used, so it could be an added value. And then recently Golang is picking up Go language. So maybe if you're starting something, why not start with the latest, right? And then testing basics. So by basic, understand what is unit testing, what is a functional testing, right? Of course, there are other types of testing. I don't want to list everything, like performance testing, security testing, penetration testing, anything, right? Understand what are basics, what are these testings, why we need to do the testing, how they do normally, etc. The next is containers. This I explained little briefly. Docker, I explained it with the normal zip file, but it's a little bit more than that. So try to understand what is Docker, why we need a Docker. Like you develop a small Java application and then you see how Docker can help you deploy it, right? If you can't understand, let us know in the YouTube channel comments or in my social media network, right? CI/CD basics. So CI/CD is a continuous integration and continuous delivery deployment that I explained in the previous slide. And then the tool that you want to is Jenkins is a go-to tool. There are lots of tools, but Jenkins is open source, so you can try it out in your laptop or in your desktop, right? It's free to download and use, so you will understand it faster. But there are lots of tools used by organizations. I mean, you can refer that big slide that I showed with all the technologies. You can check there what are the other tools that are similar to Jenkins, right? There are lots of them. OS basics, understand basics. Lots of servers are being run by Linux, right? So Linux is good to start with. Of course, there are lots of servers also being run in Microsoft. So it's not like Microsoft is less secure or it's not being used. You can see in some, like some people will explain Microsoft is less secured. Microsoft is not having everything. So I don't know who is scratching in the slides, but are you trying out something? Thanks. Okay. Or you don't like it. The next thing is cloud basics. Yeah, cloud is again a buzzword, been buzzword for a decade now. So cloud is nothing super complicated, right? You have your desktop, and then you have this same desktop with CPU and memory somewhere else. Then it could be an on-premise. That if that particular infrastructure is owned by a company, they will call it as on-premise, and it is owned by an external company like Amazon or Microsoft, and that server you are accessing or that machine you are accessing, then that is called cloud. Cloud is just a machine in some others. It's just some others machine you are renting out. Okay, that's in simplicity. Understand what is cloud, what is on-premise, right? What's the difference of it? Just a concept. Storage basics. You should know basics of what is database, how to query some tables, etc. Cache storages like caches, how they work. Network file systems like shared networks, shared folders, etc. About incident management, what is the ticketing process? How somebody raises a ticket? How somebody will process it? What is the alert management that are in place? Like I mentioned, when something is wrong in production servers, people get automatically called. So these are like alerts being generated, etc. Like as a student, you may not have all of this, need not know all of this, but this career roadmap is not just for students. It's even for people who are in other field, like developers who wants to move to DevOps, or testers who wants to move, or infrastructure engineers who wants to move, right? To this DevOps as a team, or put in resume this buzzword called DevOps. I mean, I would suggest go through these things as a beginner. Intermediate, again, there are other things like CI/CD, again, continuous integration, deployment, some advanced pipelines, code promotions, etc. Network basics, container orchestration, security, DevSecOps, infrastructure as code, proxy servers, caching, relay servers, etc. I mean, don't get overwhelmed. Again, there are so many things, but don't worry. I mean, nobody knows everything in detail, right? So start with something, start with the basics, and then eventually you will understand it when you are on the job, right? And no, there is nothing wrong in searching about it, listening to some tutorials for an hour or so, and then understand what it is. And then when you talk to people who are in industry, then they'll explain how it is really used, right? The next is monitoring and logging. So logging is important. You generate logs of your application, explaining what is happening in your application, so that something goes wrong, you will know what happened at that point of time. Monitoring is the one that you keep looking at your application if something is wrong. Dashboards, like have dashboards about how my servers are up and running or not, how my servers are doing, whether they have enough CPU, whether they have enough memory, whether how many deployments I did today, how many deployments rolled back, etc. Dashboards around it. Experts comes in when you know advanced security, putting security inside the pipeline in detail. Whether you can review the design and architecture of somebody else. Then about the machine learning, AI, chaos engineering, right? I don't want to explain any of this in detail. Don't worry about it because it will be too much for today. So start with this. And I have, as I mentioned, I have a YouTube channel where I'm preparing videos as well. So scan that QR code or search for Bribe by Bytes, right? I am putting it chat. So that's just search it in YouTube as Bribe space by Bytes, right? And you'll hit my channel. I'll also try to circulate the link of the channel in some time. Okay. So or scan this QR code. It leads to the channel. The idea is that in my channel, I'm going to explain each one of these topics in coming videos in detail. I don't want to overload this meeting with that. And then you guys can follow it along. I don't know whether you guys like the way I explain things. If you like it, then you'll love the channel as well, because I do the same thing there. So that's the end of my session. that's what I wanted to talk about. And this is just my beginning screen, right? You can now make a note of my number, make a note of my email ID. You can scan for the channel. You can search for Bribe by Bytes and locate it as well. So feel free to contact me, right? Be in touch. I would say start looking at articles, reading about it, right? Once you understand it, when you want to know about how it is being done in an industry, then let me know, right? Maybe I don't mind answering some simple questions, but if everybody is raising simple questions, then it will be difficult to handle. So try to understand something, and then if you are getting blocked somewhere, let me know. If you want to understand how industry does, let me know. Try to contact me, right? So putting it in, either Instagram chat or in YouTube comments. I would prefer putting everything in YouTube comments because that's where I see regularly. WhatsApp is something that I don't regularly use because I have lots of groups where too many notifications, I'm unable to handle it. So YouTube, if you can open to any of my video, in any relevant video, if you can put it in the comments your questions, I'll answer it there as well, right? So feel free to keep in touch. So that's the end of my session. So any questions, we still have like 10 minutes. If you want, you can go through any questions, put it in chat, be open, start your mic and start chatting.
That's nice. Thank you so much, Narayanan. Probably our students, they would be learning only from books, and today they've got something new experience learning from you, from your experience of 15 years in IT industry. Probably they'll be connecting with me with their email ID. I will share your recorded video and presentation to them. Probably they can ping you for any queries on any of the software topics that you were discussing about. That's nice and lovely to have your presence here with us.
Thank you, guys. Thanks a lot, Kasturi, for allowing me to do that. As
No,
I mentioned this.
I should thank you so much because we were circulating this information and every day we are being conducting alumni and alumni are being different sources are being connected working in different industries for students. Since it is lockdown, we are making it very useful for the student to do it by virtual. So thank you so much for sparing your valuable time with us for these 2 hours. Probably many were waiting in the queue. It was like 100 we made it in Zoom. Probably we would meet in another session with the in Microsoft Teams at least. Like you can connect many of them.
Yeah.
Probably
okay,
they will connect you with all your YouTube channels and visit all your videos. And I will also share your screenshot to them in the group which I have now.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kasturi.
Thank you so much. I think one of your colleagues is also helping you, by the way.
Yes.
Thank you so much for him also. It is pleasure that you are an alumni and your colleague. Thank you so much. It's nice to have you present. Probably we will soon connect it for another session shortly.
Yeah, sure. Do get in touch with me. So you guys have any questions, reach out to me anywhere else if you want. If that's the end. Thanks everyone for being patient for 2 years to ask. Sorry, yeah. Sorry, Kasturi, I missed your statement.
No, there was some good feedback on the chat session also. That was a wonderful session, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, guys, for being patient for 2 hours. It's a long session, even for me, if I want to attend something like that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, Narayanan, so you can log out. I would just give them instruction for feedback, and I would also end up the session.
Okay, thank you. Great.
Thank you so much, and for your colleague.
We will meet on Bribe by Bytes.
Yeah, sure. Bye bye.